You're listening to Life of the Record, classic albums told by the people who made them. My name is Dan Nordheim. Built to Spill formed in Boise, Idaho in 1992 by Doug Martsch, Brett Netson, and Ralph Yautz. Their debut album, Ultimate Alternative Waivers, was released on CZ Records in 1993. For their next album, Martsch changed the lineup to include former bandmates Brett Nelson and Andy Capps, and also started working with producer Phil Eck. There's Nothing Wrong with Love was released on Up Records in 1994. Built to Spill signed with Warner Brothers before beginning work on their third album, this time with Peter Lansdowne on drums, and Martsch playing all of the other instruments. Dissatisfied with the results, Martsch brought back in Brett Nelson and new drummer Scott Plouff to record the album a second time. After the tapes from those sessions got damaged, they ended up recording the album a third time. Perfect From Now On was eventually released in 1997. In this episode, for the 25th anniversary, Doug Martsch looks back on how Perfect From Now On came together. This is the making of Perfect From Now On.
Hi, this is Doug Martsch from Built to Spill, and we're talking about Perfect From Now On. I think when we made Perfect From Now On that I had an idea that I was at least trying to make a perfect record, whatever that means. Well, when my wife and I were kids, we didn't know each other, but we both happened to do the same thing, which was tell ourselves that we were going to be perfect from now on. And that meant, maybe no more swearing, or that we would do our homework every night, or, not get our finger pinched or something. And it was always an ideal that we kind of thought was real that you could actually do. And as you grow up, you realize you can't actually do that, but you can't really help but try. It was the first time that Built to Spill made a record that we had time and the budget and expectations to make a good record. Everything I'd done up until that point was just punk rock, just going in there and knocking it out and having fun, having more fun back then, because this was the first time that I made a record that I knew there was going to be an audience beyond my family and a few friends, And so there's some pressure from that, not pressure to make a hit record, just pressure to make a decent record, a record that deserved to be heard by strangers. At that time in my life, and still to this day probably to some degree, I'm not a very good musician and a very good singer, So being in the studio is a real struggle for me. And playing live shows, I just kind of let it go, and I'm pretty comfortable because for one thing, I can't really hear what I'm doing that well. But when I'm in the studio, I really struggle to like try to get things to sound good. I would do, 30, 40 takes of a guitar riff or a vocal take, and it's often really discouraging, laying down a track and then going into the control room and listening to it. I'm rarely ever not disappointed by what I've done. So making records has always been, and there's moments of it that are great and fun and like you would imagine them being, like it looks like when you see a documentary about a band and, how exciting it is. For me, there's moments here and there of that, but mostly it was just a lot of pulling teeth. When I first wrote the songs, I demoed them all out on like a cassette 8-track. And then when it was time to make the record, I basically wanted to do all the instruments myself and just find a drummer, which is the instrument that I don't know how to play at all. And so I found a drummer and we went and recorded stuff, and I felt like I really wasn't as good as I thought I was on the bass, and it felt like it wasn't congealing to me. It just sounded kind of like a little bit of a mess. So we worked on the record though for, I don't know how long, maybe a month or something, a few sessions. And we ended up actually using Made Up Dreams from that first session with Peter on drums and me on the bass and stuff. But then decided to get Brett Nelson, who had played bass on There's Nothing Wrong with Love. And he's like my childhood friend who got me into playing music, kid I grew up with. And, we had our first bands together and stuff. So I wanted him back in the band because he's someone that I could really lean on and trust. And then for a drummer, I wanted to start over. I think Peter did a good job, who played the drums, and he probably did a great job, but I just wanted a clean slate. And so I wanted to get a different drummer. And then that's when Calvin Johnson recommended Scott Plouff. And I didn't really think he would fit what we were doing, but I just liked him so much. And then I really started to love his drumming. We rehearsed for a while and we recorded the record, all the basic tracks in Seattle with Phil Eck. And then we decided to do overdubs in Boise. And Phil drove down to Boise with the tapes, and we started recording, and the tapes were kind of they're like leaving a little bit of tape dust on the tape machine. I guess the tape was kind of shredding and slowly dying, I guess, and we weren't really sure why or how exactly it happened. We thought maybe it was from him driving in a hot car that distance, or maybe it was just the different tape machines or a bad batch of tape. We didn't really know. And we also weren't totally sure if the tapes were going to shred any worse, but we just were afraid that they might. And we didn't want to take a chance of doing a bunch of work and then the tapes not really working. And also we thought at that time too that maybe we could do a little better job. That was my thought, was if we gave it another shot, having done it and listening to it a bunch, and maybe having a little bit more rehearsals, that the band could play the songs a little better. So that's why we ended up scrapping it that second time. And then, then third time we just muscled through it. When we signed to Warner Brothers, I was definitely conflicted about signing to a major label, and for different reasons, Yeah, I mean, part of it was that I wanted like the money we made to be in our community, you know, to make money for friends. And part of it was, you know, making sure that we got a decent cut of our money. And part of it was just the idea of being bought by a corporation, you know, that really doesn't care that much about art on a level, you know. So I talked to a lot of people and got people's opinions and stuff. And again, Calvin Johnson was another person that I went to, and he was for me doing it, and that was kind of a big thing. But the bottom line was, once I saw that I could get enough money to quit my day job by signing to Warner Brothers, I think it was pretty much done at that point. We signed right when, you know, like the year that my son was born, or I guess maybe the next year. Yeah, at the time when I signed to Warner Brothers, my thought was that I didn't want to go on tour. I wanted to stay home, and I thought with signing to a major label, I could afford to stay home and make records, and that be my livelihood, at least for a while. This was something I didn't think was going to go on for, you know, I didn't think I was going to have a career. I thought I was going to have a few years to be able to, you know, try this out until they realized I wasn't going to sell enough records. That was definitely something that was a conscious thing for me, was to not sound like grunge or other things that were going on at that time. And that was the case with the first Built to Spill record, and There's Nothing Wrong with Love was definitely all about not wanting to sound like grunge. And this record was as well, not wanting to sound like other bands in the 90s, trying to do our own thing. This record had long songs and ambitious musical goals, partially because I kind of wanted a record that was not going to be commercially successful, or in a way that a corporation would shove music down people's throats. I didn't want them to try to sell our stuff to people. I wanted our music to grow in a, you know, natural, organic way, and for people to hear us because someone recommended us, a friend recommended us, and they heard something and thought it sounded good. I didn't want them to listen to us because we got played on the radio 50 times in the day, and people, you know, eventually like, oh, okay, I've heard this so many times, I guess I like it. And then, oh, I've heard this song so many times, I don't like it anymore. You know, I wanted our music to get into people the way that the music I loved got into me, you know, not being shoved into our throats through radio and MTV or whatever. There was definitely a conscious decision to try to make a record that wasn't going to go too far. So in a way it was that, in a way it was just like what I wanted to do musically, the music I was listening to and things I liked. And part of it was just like having a budget and having an opportunity to experiment and try some things like this. So there's a few different things that led to the kind of music that ended up on the record. You know, I feel like for some reason that I always knew Randy was going to be first, like from the get-go. Well, this song was had the working title Unwound until the record was ready to go. And because to me it reminded me of the band Unwound, just this sort of kind of pretty but dissonant, simple little guitar line. So yeah, Randy describes eternity is the way that a youth group teacher, religious class thing I went to when I was a kid in junior high school, just describing eternity to us. And just the image stuck with me. And I've heard from other people since then that it's, there's slight variations on that metaphor for different, in different religions and stuff. And that song too is like, Brett Netson plays guitar on all the wah guitar, and that really, we finished the record at some point and decided we need some help on this. Like this, we need something to push it over the edge, and that's what Netson did. On all the old records, I wanted every instrument to be clear, to be able to hear what everyone's up to. But I don't know if that aesthetic really makes that much sense or is that important, The older that I get, I think that the way things blend together and things disappearing into each other is just as interesting as being able to clearly hear what everyone's up to. Another thing with this record is I think that if it had sounded the way that I wanted it to sound, it might actually be a more boring record. I think that part of its, what sets it apart is the weirdness of it, the like shortcomings. Like people say in art, like the things that you can't draw very well, those are what make your style. And I feel like that's kind of the way it is with this record and my music, that the things that I'm not very good at are kind of what make it interesting. And I think Scotty's a really great drummer. I always kind of wanted to push him into being more of a classic rock drummer and putting in more rolls and stuff. And he always kind of thought that was sort of show-offy or something. And he just keep things really basic and, just keep, like, not basic, but he was just into doing patterns and not really doing too much extra fills and stuff. And I think that gives it I think that's a really cool part of it, that at the time I was a little disappointed, but looking back at it, I think it gives it it's another one of the weird things about it that makes it interesting. Yeah, I think that if I made it the way I wanted it to be, it would sound like, like Oasis or something, like, which is not what I wanted, not really what I want to sound like and what I want my music to be like. But I think it would have just been more conventional, like a more conventional sort of big pop production, I Would Hurt a Fly is one of my favorite songs for sure. It seemed like it kind of came pretty naturally as a written song. It's kind of based on sort of a weird chord shape. Sometimes that's enough to make a song interesting to me. I don't know. I was kind of imagined it like a lounge song or something, or not a lounge song, but like, Tony Bennett or something singing it. Like it kind of reminds me of that sort of a song. That was a song that I think the bass part is, Brett plays bass, but I think I wrote all the bass parts because I had written it for when we did it, when I did it in the first place, and had like really specific bass parts that I wanted. There's a few songs on the record that I wanted Brett to play the things that I had written, but most of it is Brett coming up with his own stuff, Brett Nelson. It was one of the songs, I guess, that we needed some help. So John McMahon and Brett Netson came in to help that song out a lot. John has that incredible cello solo with really kind of strange dissonant notes and stuff. And then Brett has his wah, kind of bluesy wah, helped the song a lot.
It feels like fingernails across the moon. Ordeal of your wings together. There's a mean bone in my body. It's connected to the problems that I won't take for an answer. I won't take that from you because I heard a fly.
Kind of a little bit of nonsense, and just obviously a really kind of obvious turn of the phrase. The lyrics I like the best are the "Let you go to sleep, feeling bad as me." Those are the lyrics that I thought were really good. That, to me, that's the most powerful part. I liked that part too because, again, it's the chord shapes. Then the chord shapes that are that song are the main part of this song, and then it's a variation of those chord shapes that came up with that really pretty chord progression and melody. Sometimes I stumble across something that just sounds really nice to me, and that's one of my favorite ones.
Let you go to sleep, feeling bad as me. Let you go to sleep, feeling bad.
I think actually another reason why the songs became kind of longer and ambitious in that way was because I felt like I had certain parts that didn't warrant making a whole song out of, and so I'd stick them into a song, and a lot of them grew into long, drawn out, weird songs just because I didn't think any of the parts were good enough to carry a whole song, but you threw them all together and it made this interesting kind of almost collage kind of song. Yeah, Stop the Show, that's a song that we're playing currently, and to me that was the beginning of Stop the Show. Was kind of like, to me, the coolest sounding thing on the record. Like, this is what I want our music to sound like. I don't really remember how these songs came together. I know that when I write songs that are long like that now, I take a bunch of little ideas that I have and just try them out with each other. So I'll have all these different ideas. I try them out with each other and change the key or the tempo or the time signature of one part to see if it'll fit in this other song. It's just a bunch of that. I think that's probably how all these songs came to be, all the long ones. I think it was really difficult for Scott and Brett to wrap their head around what I was trying to do with these songs, and they did a really amazing job. And they learned the songs pretty quickly, and that's where I think that the second recording with them really benefited, was that they had some time to really live with the songs and get them into their heads and not be thinking about when the next part's coming, but it coming more naturally. That song was called Nirvana because it sort of was just like a rock, just like, to me it was like a grunge song. But it was also a Beatles thing, you know. That was a song that I wrote the bass part for. When it goes into the verse, the kind of, you know, walking, bubbly kind of walking bass part there. It might even be totally ripped off from a specific Beatles song. I can't think of what, but this record was probably more influenced by Beatles than anything. And yeah, again, it's one of those songs where I had a lot of little ideas and didn't really want to make a whole song out of them. Like the kind of the end part, the after a while, they know your style, that whole part. You know, that was just like, this part's cool, but I don't want to make a whole song out of it. By the time I was working with those guys, even by the time I was working with Peter, the songs were pretty set. I mean, there might have been a few adjustments later on, a few edits here and there. Definitely like the end of Stop the Show, you know, it kind of disappears and comes back with some weird sounding drums and whatever. That was something that was some later on edit type of situation. But for the most part, these songs were pretty well established as far as the parts go. And then it was a matter of like just coming up with overdubs and things like that. But the structure of the song was definitely there.
After a while, it hurts to smile, and if you laugh, it's just a typical miracle.
Yeah, those guys did a really great job because, you know, I had sort of a little bit of a vision, not super detailed, but I had an idea of what these songs felt like. And those guys, you know, they didn't really know. You know, there's so many times where by the time the record's done and they're like, oh, that's what this song, you know, is. I had no idea. I didn't know that this was what you were going for. This was the feel of it. Those guys learned the songs from me just showing them to them. They didn't learn them from these demos. I didn't even let anyone hear them. They were just for me. You know, around the year 2000 maybe, I did a cleaning and just threw out tons of cassettes. And somehow I kept a few cassettes, but I threw those away. I threw out the masters and the mixes, just like, I never want to hear this again. These are horrible. And I think it would be pretty funny to hear them again. But yeah, I threw it all away. One of the few things I regret in a weird way, that just because I think they'd be interesting. I know I did a lot of weird stuff on them. Like there's like some drum machine stuff and making like sounds with my mouth for instruments that have ideas of things. I mean, we made this record. We spent all this time and made this record, and so much better than these demos were. I don't want to hear these, and no one would want to hear. There's no reason for these demos to be. And then, now I have an appreciation for crappy versions of things and demos and stuff, and I think it would be interesting because they're so different, But anyway, they're gone. Another thing is, Built to Spill didn't really have a sound. I didn't have a sound. I didn't have an amp that I used or guitar or any kind of pedals that were like my sound. Every record was different. The first record to the second record to this record. I didn't want them to sound the same, and I didn't have a way that I wanted a guitar to sound. I liked all different kinds of guitar sounds. So, it took a while to figure that stuff out and to sort of fine tune it. And it's something where, I didn't know what I wanted, but I could tell if it was what I didn't want, and had a vague idea of what I wanted it to be. Phil, the producer, was really helpful for that stuff. Yeah, and again, that was mostly Phil. I mean, I really didn't know how to dial up a guitar tone, or know what amps do what, other than just like the most basic things, distortion and delay or whatever. But yeah, the record before that, all the stuff before it, I was basically just using the studio like a 4-track, and I didn't even care about having reverb or having things feel like you were in an environment or anything. To me it was almost like direct. Like on There's Nothing Wrong with Love, I don't think there's any reverb on that record on any instrument at all. And that was kind of my weird choice that Phil somehow went along with. But on this record, yeah, we wanted it to be more atmospheric, and I can't really remember how we did it, but I know that mostly it was Phil dialing in guitar tones, moving microphones, just little tiny bits and stuff. I couldn't even tell the difference. It's like the more you turn it up, the better it sounds to me. Made Up Dreams is the song that was one of the songs that we recorded that was on tape that we thought might be damaged, and that's what makes me unsure if the tape really got damaged, because we were able to work on that song and mix it, and it worked fine, And that's another one of my favorite ones. That's a song that we're not playing it currently, but it's a song that the band always has played live. It's got Rob Roth Mellotron on it. That's really a nice part of the song. Some of the words are nonsense. The beginning is just a bunch of nonsense, just something to sing. I like the chords, and there's some of my favorite words. The title was a friend of mine just gave me some song titles, and then I wrote a song around the song title. Yeah, my friend Wayne Flower, he was the drummer in my old band Tree People. He was in the Halo Benders a little bit and stuff. There's some stuff that I'll paint over, and a lot of songs too, I'll write like a lot of lyrics and try it out with a bunch of different things, and then eventually come up with some other lyrics. Every once in a while I'll hear some old demos of something that I've worked on, and I even forgot that I had totally a whole different set of words for the whole song. Sometimes you just sing a line and it doesn't really mean anything or make much sense, but it just sounds right, like the Beatles or something, where it's like it just sounds right. Just the way the vowels and consonants come out of your mouth. My whole thing with lyrics has always been that if you just don't want to write horrible lyrics, if they're not horrible, then the music will give them strength and they will resonate with people, even if they don't mean anything, as long as they're not a drag or offensive or whatever. But at the same time, of course, who doesn't like a really good lyric too? And if I can come up with one of those every now and then to, hold it all together, or steal one from one of my friends or my wife. To my mind, there isn't like a theme or a thing that I was going through at that time. But of course there sort of was, a lot of stuff I wrote with my wife, and like the album title is something that we both kind of came up with, and it was something that we both did when we were kids, where we just decide, okay, I'm going to be perfect from now on. And she kind of had that same feeling growing up, and so, and there's a lot of her lyrics and just things that came out of discussions with her that ended up on the record. Yeah, my main memory of Velvet Waltz is there's like a vibrato or tremolo guitar going through the whole song, and we had recorded the drums and bass, and so we wanted this tremolo guitar going through it, and we didn't record to a click track, so keeping the tremolo to be in sync with the drums and bass was really tricky, and we just had to piece it together, and it took hours of me just playing the guitar, and there was just a limited amount of tape space, so we couldn't use a bunch of tracks and have a bunch of tracks or playlists or whatever to choose from, and or move things around on a computer and line it up. It all had to be kind of just done live. And for a lot of it, my good friend Chris Taquino, he ran Up Records, and he was in the studio sitting there turning the knob on the tremolo pedal, trying to keep it in sync with the song. This was before digital was really being used to make records. I mean, digital was being used for mastering and the editing and sequencing and that kind of stuff. But as far as for doing the recording, the multi-tracking, it wasn't really happening back then. I mean, maybe Michael Jackson or someone was starting to do it, but no, it wasn't. This was the way records were all made at this time. Yeah, recording on the tape made this thing really complex. And so a song that's twice the length of a regular song doesn't take twice as long to work on. It takes 10 times as long, because you have to start sharing these tracks. So many of these songs have the first half of the song, there's a guitar on this track, and then the next part there's some percussion. And then another part of the song, there's another guitar track that's totally a different sound and needs to be panned to a different spot and EQ'd differently or whatever, So there's a a lot of like moves that had to be made. And this was the first record that we made that we used a automated mixing board because it was just so complex that things had to be, not every track, but many of the overdub tracks would be like, guitar at one part, vocal on another part, a backup vocal or something, and something else here. Trying to keep that all organized, We have all these pieces of paper with, all these things written on it, trying to keep it all organized, me and Phil both. Trying to wrap our brains around what was even there,
In a world that's not so bad. In a world times chilling in the sun. In the sun. In the sun.
And it's called Velvet Waltz because there's no hi-hat on it, and that's like a Velvet Underground thing. And this was a song, to me, that was a working title, Velvet Waltz, like Unwound in Nirvana. Like it wasn't really a title, and I wanted to change the title, and then just sort of like, oh, I can't think of anything good. That seems all right. In fact, the record, I wanted the record not to have any titles, any song titles, and tried to do that and just realized it was going to be too much of a pain in the ass to try to not have any song titles on the record. I was inspired by that Butthole Surfers record, Hairway to Steven, and instead of song titles, it just had pictures on the thing. Like 1 was some picture, 2 was another weird picture. I can't remember why I thought that it couldn't be done. Like I was just thinking maybe like for getting played on the radio or for a CD, and there had to be something that showed up in the thing, and maybe like, and then I think Butthole Surfers did put names to those songs, or I know that they did. Eventually, it's like, I don't know, for some reason I just thought it was going to cause more trouble than it was worth, and just, in a way it seemed kind of like people would think it was annoying and bratty to do that. And this is a song again that Brett Netson plays an epic guitar solo at the end of that really, to me, just makes the song. And a little bit of John McMahon on cello. It's another one that got both of those guys to come turn it into something special. Just Netson ripping. I don't know what he was thinking. I feel like Brett just came in for a day or two and just flew in and just laid down all his stuff. He laid down a bunch of stuff, and then I kind of just picked and chose what I thought was cool from what he laid down. Like he played a lot more than what ended up on the record. I can't think of me playing any wah stuff on this album. I think it might be all him. There might be a thing or two of me, but yeah, anything that sounds like Jimi Hendrix is him. The song Out of Sight, I like the song pretty well, except there's a funky part that I'm just a little bit embarrassed about. But I like the intro, those weird chords. It's like a major chord going to a minor chord. It's like a kind of cool Beatles thing. That's kind of the best part of the song to me, is just the major to minor simple chord thing. And, just a lot of nonsense words on this one. I like this song, except I don't like the kind of funky part. It's like the I know that you'll get yours when you get something. I know. It's like kind of I don't know. Yeah, it's just the funkiness, just the kind of. And I know there's a little bit of that too on There's Nothing Wrong with Love. There's some kind of stuff like that. It was kind of before I had an aesthetic against funky white music. And I like the punk part, but I never felt like we did quite a very good job of it, or I couldn't sing it very well and stuff. It was so hard to sing. It killed me trying to sing this song.
What a sight, what a sound, what a way to bring people down, what a way to bring me down.
To me, the lyrics in Kicked It in the Sun, like the lyrics that begin the song, are just about hanging out in Boise. Like there's a feeling from Ada to Irene. Those are a couple of streets in my neighborhood, like stretching 10 blocks or something. And it's sort of like just living in Boise and staying up late at night, writing songs. And that's kind of what the beginning of the song reminds me of, and maybe just some nonsense to sort of throw it together. And then the Kicked It in the Sun part is nothing, just some words that sounded good. The phrase that just popped into my head for no reason and just sounded kind of musical. I think it has that connotation of like relaxing in the sun, but I don't know what it means, but to me it didn't mean that. It meant more like kicking something into the sun, like destroying something. When we made the record, I was like so self-conscious and did not want anyone from the label coming down to the studio to like hear what we were up to, because it felt like we were just like didn't know what the fuck we were doing, and just like I don't know, like the stuff was taking a long time to take any kind of shape that sounded like a good record. And so the guy who signed us, our A&R guy, Joe McEwen, he was a really cool guy and just let us do it the way we wanted to do it. And then he came in to listen to it. He came to Seattle when we finished mixing, and we were like our last day in the studio or something. And he came down and we just played him the whole record. And he just I think he just stood there the whole time, listened to the whole record, stood there and kind of played some air guitar. And just at the end of it was like, It's like, that's great. And that was kind of it, you know. I don't know if anyone there even knew about us except him, you know. I don't know if anyone had any kind of expectations in any way. I think we flew under the radar at Warner Brothers. I don't think people paid that much attention to what we were doing, and the people that did were like people that were art, you know, music people that trusted us and didn't expect us to do anything except what we wanted to do. Yeah, we stayed within our budget, but instead of pocketing a little bit of money at the end of it, we just spent the whole budget on the record instead of having some money left over.
He seems so unashamed of how he operated. Corresponds to the facts that you want, despite his expectation. He turned out mediocre. His master plan so we're special in other ways. Ways out, mothers appreciate.
Yeah, at some point, I can't remember what it was in reference to, but my wife said, well, we're special in other ways our mothers appreciate. And yeah, I thought it was hilarious and thought it would make a good lyric in a song. And then the end song that it goes into, the other lyrics sort of go along with that theme of like, I can't remember now the lyrics. It's something about being mediocre, you know? Like, oh, his master plan was mediocre. Just like, you know, just trying hard to do something rad, and you know, it's just okay. You know, we do the best we can, but not all of us are capable of doing amazing things. Yeah, artistically, and maybe in other parts of our lives too, trying to just do something incredible and amazing and inspiring, and then coming up with something that's pretty good, you know, because you're trying so hard, you're shooting for such a high ideal. You're not going to get there, but you're going to do something that's, you know, pretty good. If you're not shooting for that super high ideal, you're going to really suck. So you got to shoot for that really high thing in order to do something that's passable. And that's just the best that most of us can hope for, you know, the best that most of us can do. There's a handful of people that are geniuses or just really, for whatever reason, can do things that just, you know, are amazing. But for most of us, it's trying and, you know, trying to get some joy out of trying.
You can't trust anyone, 'cause you're untrustable. How can you trust someone you know can't trust you? You won't help anyone, 'cause you're unusable.
Yeah, the first part was something I remember just kind of, that was one that I wrote a lot of the bass parts and stuff. It was something I remember just 4-tracking and putting together. And yeah, and lyrically untrustable. You know, it's one of the few songs that kind of is like sticks to one subject through the whole song, kind of. We're talking about a person and just how flawed people are, I guess. You know, myself, maybe other people, but yeah, it's just about people. I mean, I wasn't, you know, nothing serious about myself. just people, just the way that people are, you know, just the limitations to our humanity or something.
And I love to see it, but it's something you just feel. And I love to feel it, but it just isn't real. And God is wherever you're performing for. And God is wherever you perform for.
The chorus of Untrustable is like J.D. Salinger, Franny and Zoe story, where they just, then that's like sort of the ending of the story where Franny tells Zoe that the person that she was performing for, is God. And it's not a religious thing. It's just like God is in, what matters, who matters. I think the second one, I can't remember how they got connected, but yeah, the second part of it is like the less interesting song. Maybe even something we just sort of saw if it would work, tried it to see if it would work. It's like a really untypical song for me to write, because usually my thing with writing songs was about coming up with sort of an original kind of chord progression or melody or whatever. And to me, the second part of that song is real conventional. Like it's like a blues thing, I think. It's like a, 1-4-5 chord progression type of thing. But I don't remember what I liked about it or why I thought it was a good idea. And I like it fine, but it just seems so foreign to how I usually make music or what I like about music. For some reason, it was satisfying in that song to me. That was more about my wife and just like struggles with being like too compassionate. It's like, why can't you apathize with Jesus' point of view? Like, why can't you be less compassionate, and just kind of let some things go? Why do things affect you so intensely? That's what that song is kind of about, like her just suffering because she has too much compassion and love for people. I think I'm also compassionate, but I wouldn't let compassion like control me in that way. I wouldn't let my compassion ruin my day. Sometimes I would, but for the most part I'd be like, well, that's just the way it is. It sucks, but I got to live my life and be okay, be okay in this world. I think it's hard. I think it's harder for everyone now than ever, just watching how horrible things have gotten and watching people suffer, and you feel guilty and you feel like you want to do something, but you also just have to keep existing. I was talking about some personal things, but I don't know that it was ever like helpful, or I don't feel like it was ever an avenue to a dialogue for us or anything. It was more, we'd more talk about it like what was a good idea for a song, like just what made sense artistically. She was someone that I always like would run everything by. Every idea I had, I would see what she thought of it, because she was the person I trusted more than anyone. about my music. I felt like she got it, and also got music, in general. I met her when I was in high school, and she dated Brett Nelson. They lived in Twin Falls, and I moved up to Boise, and so I met her through him. But we were always really close, and so she was like one of the 10 fans of Farm Days, me and Brett's old band. We were teenagers in high school. We had a band called Farm Days, and we lived in different cities, but we'd get together once in a while and make songs. And so she knew my music well from the get-go. After we made this record, I was going to switch up the lineup, but I just loved playing with these guys. I loved hanging out with them. And I also had just a different idea about what I wanted the band to be. And I wanted the band to get really good and be like a proficient band where we all grew together and became, just super tight and really had a sound that was us. And these were the guys I wanted to do that with. And then I also wanted to collaborate with them. This record, I'd shown them all the songs, but I wanted to make some music where they were writing their own parts, because I thought a lot of the bands that I thought were good at that time were doing that, like Modest Mouse, Unwound and stuff, where they'd go into a jam room and, everyone would contribute to the music equally. And that's what we did. We made Keep It Like a Secret, which was very much based on us all jamming together a bunch. And then there's a big circus ending. For some reason, we made some circus music at the end. At the time, I thought it was killer, but, maybe it's a little bit like that funk part. And I don't know about funk music and circus music and stuff. I like the part where we sound like the Velvet Underground. That's what I think. That's what I wish that I had done with my whole career, was made stuff that sounded more like that, and not made these sort of musical decisions that were just sort of weird directions that I just don't care much about these days. When the record came out, I don't really remember how I was feeling. I don't remember. I think I mostly felt like I was just moving on to the next batch of songs. We'd already started writing Keep It Like a Secret songs and writing together as a band. And I remember being really excited about that and not really thinking much about Perfect From Now On anymore. And yeah, when we toured right after the record came out, we did none of the songs, 0 of them. I just didn't have it in me. I just didn't want to at all. Like, none of it sounded any fun at all. But mostly, I just didn't want to hear those songs again. I was so burnt out after making that record. And, I was burnt out on it, but at the same time, I was proud of it, And, like I said, everyone that I worked with was great, and there's no way I could have done it without Phil. He was incredible. I mean, he's such a good producer, and I trust him so much with making things sound good and his musical ideas. And he was also just really supportive and really enthusiastic. And he was like me too. We had some points where we were just he was as done as I was, as burnt out. He'd never done anything like this before either. He'd never spent this much time on a record or done a major label record either. So we were both, had a lot of burnouts. But, he cheered me on through the whole thing and really supported me and was enthusiastic about it. The very end of it, I'm trying to think of the name of that song. The song that was left off the record. And when we were mixing the record, and we finally got everything mixed, and I was like, what about whatever that last song was called? And he's like, oh man, I don't want to do that. And we kind of got in a fight because at the very end of it, because I was mad at him for not wanting to just muscle through this very last song. When we finished the record, the thing that meant the most to me about the record was I came away from it thinking that I could make a record no matter what. That no matter how hard it was or, whatever challenges, that in the end it could get done. And that was something I don't think I knew for sure when we started it. Mostly it was like just doubts about whether or not I'm really a musician, Like this might not be my calling or a job for me, This might be just harder than what I'm capable of. And, maybe I can make, some punk rock records or make some home recordings and stuff, but I don't think I really am like cut out to be a professional musician, And by the end of it, when it was done, I was like, oh yeah, I can be a professional musician. I can do this. Because I had a real strong confidence. Like if we just work super hard and you just keep going, and when you don't want to do it, you just keep doing it. You can, I can do this, and that was like a real thing, like a really empowering thing for me. Finishing that record. Like I said, I don't really look back at it very often, but just sitting here now, looking back at it a bunch, I feel really proud of it. It's like getting feedback from people like you that enjoyed it means a lot to me, really that's what makes me proud of it, is that people enjoy it, And, over the years, people have told me how much they like it, and I don't know, I just feel really, really lucky for that. Because it just as easily, I wouldn't be surprised at all if just no one really cared about it, or it was, a fine record or whatever. So just the fact that some people really like it is unbelievable to me,
Visit lifeoftherecord.com for more information about Built to Spill. You'll also find a link to stream or purchase Perfect from now on. Thanks for listening.